MAVAKAGA.
Okay, so picture this. You've just moved to Milton, Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
You're trying to settle into a new place. It's 7 p.m. You're downstairs with your family doing some renovations, and suddenly you hear a knock at the door.
New town, new home, new sounds.
Yeah.
That's definitely a recipe for, heightened senses.
You bet. So you head upstairs, and through the peephole, you see two guys in high-visibility vests.
Oh, wow.
One introduces himself as Pablo from the hospital, even flashing an ID.
Ah.
But here's the thing. You've only been in Canada for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And nobody in your family knows a Pablo.
That's a bit unsettling. I can see why your mind might start racing in that situation.
Right. And to add to the weirdness, Pablo's friend is urging him to just leave it, and they head straight to your neighbor's house.
Oh, geez.
Later, your neighbor confirms they tried the same story with him.
Oh, wow.
So what's going on here? Attempted home invasion. Elaborate prank.
Yeah.
Or something else entirely. We're diving deep into this neighborhood mystery today, using your Reddit posts and all those intriguing comments to see if we can unravel this strange encounter.
It's like a real-life episode of, a true crime podcast unfolding right on your doorstep.
Totally. In your post, you mentioned that your first thought was a possible home invasion.
Right.
Especially with your cars not in the driveway and the lights off.
Yeah.
Coming from London, you're used to associating unexpected knocks with potential burglaries, especially at that hour.
That's a perfectly understandable reaction. Our past experiences, especially in a bustling city like London, often shape how we perceive and respond to potential threats.
Sure.
Moving to a quieter town like Milton doesn't necessarily erase those ingrained feelings of caution.
Makes sense. And many Reddit users echoed that sentiment, advising you to report the incident to the police, even if it's just through the non-emergency line or to Crime Stoppers Halton, just to create a record of it.
That's good advice. Even if this turned out to be harmless reporting, suspicious activity helps law enforcement track patterns and potentially prevent more serious incidents down the line. It's all about proactive community safety.
Now, some Reddit users suggested that maybe the hospital was running a donation drive.
Okay.
Could Pablo and his friend have been legitimate fundraisers, just oddly timed now?
It's possible, but there are a few things that make that explanation a bit flimsy.
Yeah.
Door-to-door fundraising at 7 p.m., especially in a typically quieter town like Milton, is pretty unusual.
Yeah.
Plus, you mentioned that you hadn't received any prior communication from the hospital about a fundraising campaign.
Exactly. And wouldn't they usually send out flyers or emails beforehand?
Absolutely. It's standard practice to create awareness and build anticipation before launching any door-to-door campaigns.
Right. Yeah.
So while we can't completely rule out the fundraising angle, it definitely raises some eyebrows.
And that's where another intriguing theory from the Reddit thread comes in. Maybe someone saw the hospital's fundraising appeals, assuming there were some, and decided to exploit the situation, posing as collectors to scam people.
Ah, the classic exploiting trust tactic. It's an unfortunate reality that scammers often prey on people's generosity, especially when it comes to causes like healthcare. They know how to tug at heartstrings and make people let their guard down.
So we've got potential attempted burglary, legitimate but oddly timed fundraising, a possible scam, and then your wife added another layer to this whole mystery.
Oh.
She thinks it might have been teenagers just trying to make a quick buck.
Oh.
You pointed out that they weren't particularly intimidating and weren't hiding their faces, which is pretty atypical for would-be burglars.
That brings up a fascinating question. How much can we truly discern about someone's intentions based solely on their appearance? It's a complex issue, and we often rely on visual cues to make snap judgments, but those can be incredibly misleading.
Totally. It's like that classic saying, don't judge a book by its cover, except in this case, it's more like, don't judge a potential home invasion by the high-vis vests.
Precisely. Appearances can be deceptive, and this situation perfectly illustrates that point. We've got multiple possible explanations, each with its own set of pros and cons. So where do we go from here? Let's delve a bit deeper into the psychology of deception. Did Pablo and his friend exhibit any specific behaviors that might offer further clues? Let's rewind a bit and look at how Pablo and his friend presented themselves. You mentioned that they weren't exactly forceful or aggressive in their demeanor.
Yeah, that's what made it even more puzzling. They were just kind of there. Not overly friendly, but not threatening either.
And you observed them through the peephole and the window before deciding not to engage.
Right. I wasn't about to open the door to strangers, especially with that uneasy feeling lingering.
That was a smart move. Trusting your gut is crucial in these situations. Now, did they seem aware that you were observing them?
Oh, they definitely saw me looking back at them through the window.
What's fascinating here is their reaction to being observed. Did they seem startled, annoyed, or indifferent?
Honestly, I'd say more indifferent than anything else. They didn't seem bothered by the fact that I was watching them.
Interesting. If they were indeed casing the place for a potential burglary, you'd think being spotted would have prompted a more noticeable reaction.
Yeah.
Perhaps a hasty retreat. Their nonchalance could suggest that burglary wasn't their primary motive.
Okay, that makes sense. But then what about the whole Pablo from the hospital story? Was that just a random fabrication?
It could be. But let's consider why they chose that particular narrative. Pablo from the hospital might be intended to evoke a sense of trust and authority.
Right.
Hospitals are generally seen as reputable institutions, and using that connection could make people more likely to engage, even if subconsciously.
That's a good point. It's almost like they were trying to create a reason for being there that wouldn't immediately raise red flags.
Yeah.
Something plausible, yet vague enough to avoid too much scrutiny.
Exactly. And the fact that the friend was urging Pablo to just leave it adds another layer of intrigue. Was he getting cold feet, or did they have a predetermined plan that they were deviating from?
It definitely makes you wonder. And then, of course, there's the question of why they went straight to the neighbor's house afterwards. Was it just random chance? Or were they targeting specific houses for some reason?
It's hard to say for certain, but it's worth noting that your neighbor also confirmed they tried the same story with him. That suggests a pattern of behavior, a deliberate approach, rather than simply knocking on random doors.
Right, so it seems unlikely that they were just aimlessly wandering the neighborhood.
Yeah.
There was definitely some intention behind their actions. And it seems like a lot of effort to go through for just a few quick bucks, like my wife suggested.
I agree. If it were simply teenagers looking for a bit of mischief, you'd expect a less elaborate ruse. This seems more calculated. Almost like they were testing the waters, gauging reactions to their story.
So we're back to the question of motive. If it wasn't a typical burglary attempt, and likely not just kids being kids, what were they really after?
Well, we've explored the possibility of them being legitimate fundraisers, though the timing and lack of prior communication from the hospital make that scenario less likely. We've also considered the scam angle, which is always a possibility, especially when people exploit trusted institutions like hospitals.
And yet something about it still doesn't quite add up. It's almost like there's a missing piece of the puzzle. What if we approach this from a different angle? Let's say their motive wasn't about immediate financial gain. Could they have been gathering information for some other purpose?
That's an intriguing thought. You're suggesting they might have been engaged in a form of reconnaissance, perhaps scoping out houses or neighborhoods for a future operation.
Exactly. Maybe they were looking for vulnerable targets or assessing security measures. The Pablo from the hospital story could have been a clever way to observe people's reactions without raising too much suspicion.
That's a compelling theory, and it aligns with the observed behavior. Their nonchalance when spotted, the consistent story used at multiple houses, and their seemingly calculated approach all point to a possible information-gathering operation.
Okay, so if we entertain this reconnaissance angle, what kind of future operation could they be planning? What would be the end game here?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately, we may never know for sure without more information. However, we can speculate based on common tactics used by various groups who engage in reconnaissance. It could range from something as simple as planning targeted package thefts to something more complex, like identifying potential victims for scams or even burglary rings.
So even though we may not have a definitive answer, this deep dive has shed light on the importance of being aware of our surroundings and trusting our instincts. Something seemingly harmless could actually be a red flag.
Absolutely. This case highlights the subtle ways in which deception can operate and the need to be vigilant, even in seemingly safe environments.
It's a good reminder that things aren't always what they seem, even in a quiet town like Milton. And sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is the allure of the unknown. It keeps us questioning, analyzing, and searching for answers.
It's a chilling thought, but it also underscores the importance of being proactive about our safety and that of our community.
I completely agree. We often think of crime prevention in terms of physical security measures like locks, alarms, and cameras.
Right.
But equally important is our awareness of social engineering tactics, the ways in which people try to manipulate or deceive us for their own gain.
Right. It's like that saying, knowledge is power. The more we understand about these tactics, the better equipped we are to recognize and avoid them.
Precisely. And that's where community awareness comes in. Sharing information about suspicious activity, even seemingly minor incidents, can help create a network of vigilance. Think of it like a digital neighborhood watch where people can collectively raise awareness and potentially prevent larger-scale issues.
So what concrete steps can our listener and anyone else in a similar situation take to be more proactive about their safety?
Well, first and foremost, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to be cautious and take steps to protect yourself. Second, report any suspicious activity to the authorities. Even if it seems insignificant, it could be part of a larger pattern. Third, engage with your community. Talk to your neighbors, participate in local forums, and stay informed about any potential threats or scams in your area.
It sounds like it's all about being observant, informed, and connected within our communities.
Exactly. We can't live in a constant state of fear, but we can empower ourselves with knowledge and proactive measures to create a safer environment for everyone.
So while we may never know for sure what Pablo and his friend were really up to, this deep dive has been a valuable reminder to stay vigilant, trust our gut, and look out for one another.
Indeed. And sometimes the most important takeaway from a mystery isn't the solution itself, but the lessons we learn along the way. It's about sharpening our critical thinking skills, questioning assumptions, and being aware of the subtle ways in which the world around us operates.
Well said. And hey, if you like this kind of content, please do consider subscribing to the channels for all things weird and wonderful. Who knows what we'll deep dive into.